Mr. Pratt, if you can hit the mute button in the left bottom of your screen for a second, and we should be set.
Okay, now see, Andrea, could you come hit the mute button for me? Left bottom.
Perfect. And just stay hovering over that button, and you'll just be able to click it as soon as we're ready. Okay. Give me a thumbs up if you are all set with that, Mr. Pratt. All right, cool. All right, hi everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is the part 2 of our Undoing Hypocrisy in Our Democracy series. This is 2 out of 10. Our first one focused specifically on learning about the county government, specifically county supervisors. And this one is now focusing on the mayorship here in our city of Milwaukee. Specifically, this is because we are in an election cycle right now, and we feel that it's important that folks are informed about the roles and responsibilities of the folks that they are they're voting for, right? While also understanding that there are so many issues with our democracy, and we can do a better job of one, being able to, put folks in position of power that represent our best interests, but also know how to hold folks accountable who aren't. So let's dive into our series focusing on Milwaukee mayors today. The structure of our city government, its impacts, accountability, and action steps that you can take to hold your future mayor accountable as we are coming close again up to an election. So let's dive in. So before we get started, this is just a rough draft of our agenda, right? So we'll be starting off by defining democracy. We'll be introducing our amazing guests, former Mayor Marvin Pratt, introducing you to our city government, how our city government affects you, and more specifically our mayor, and then what issues you care about, having a little conversation about that, a few election updates, and again, lastly, action steps. And we always want to close out these webinars with an invitation to take action. So if you guys are ready, let's dive in. So we always start by defining and redefining democracy in this space. Democracy is defined as a system of government by which the whole population or all eligible voters of the state participate, typically through electing representatives, right? That's we function under a representative democracy right now, but ART believes in building a more transformative democracy. And when we say transformative democracy, we're saying, we're talking about a way of building shared political ideology with those who have been marginalized. And this process is rooted in equitable collective decision-making about our futures and how this will shape our fight for freedom and stability in our community. So I want to take a step back and, really shout out our executive director, because she mentioned this in an op-ed of her that she that recently was published, saying, basically, moral of the story, those who are most impacted by the issues are the closest ones to the solution, right? And when we say that, right, we are saying that if we are investing and we are leaning on the leadership in our community, we can create a true thriving future for the city of Milwaukee, for this county, for this state, and for this country, and more importantly, for Black folks. So in our long-term efforts to build transformative democracy, that's what it means. It means ensuring that we're putting folks, again, closest to the issue at the helm of the work, and in the position to make the decisions. So let's continue. Introducing our grand luxurious guest, Marvin Pratt, who was our former mayor, our first Black mayor. And let's talk a little bit about him before he tells us a little bit more, right? He attended North Division High School in Marquette University, where he earned his degree in political science. He served in the U.S. Air Force, where he was stationed in the Libyan desert during Vietnam. He also had a long-standing respectable career at the city, where he began as an intern for former Mayor Meyer, eventually was elected to the city council in 1986, was the first African American chair of the Finance and Personnel Committee. And he can tell us why that Finance and Personnel Committee was, is the most important committee as it relates to the city council. And then he was the second African American to serve as the president of the council in 2000. And then lastly, he was the interim mayor, right, in 2004. And then, even after that time, when he took a step back from politics, he came back out of retirement to serve as our interim county executive until Chris Ailey was elected in 2011. He's the only person in Milwaukee's history to ever hold both these seats, right? Marvin, we had a conversation yesterday where you said that you have a history of firsts, and we thank you for paving the way. But we, want to take the time for you to introduce yourself now.
Well, thank you very much, Darren, and to everyone. Although I have a history of first, there's a couple of those positions I wish I would have had longer, okay? I wish I would have served as mayor longer and as county exec longer, but especially as mayor. I ran for public office, as you said, I ran first time in 1984. Didn't win then ran again in 86 and won. I live in the Rufus King neighborhood. I kind of identified the area that I wanted to represent, moved to the area. I used to live on 19th and Hadley, but I moved to this area and ran and was successful in a field of 13 people. Before that too, I had served as a property appraiser, first African American male to serve as a property appraiser for the city for 12 years and 2 years in the mayor's office. So, part of my thing, I said I would be alderman, you wouldn't have to train. Now, that was a little presumptuous of me because no matter what you do, it will take you a little bit to kind of learn the position and, to learn where the bodies are buried and what to do well and what not to do. So, but I had I'm going to say a very good career. I used to see these aldermen, they were downstairs. I worked on the 5th floor of City Hall. And the aldermen, as they came out of the 2nd floor, and I used to kind of basically say that a lot of them seemed very cocky to me, like they had a lot going for them, and I didn't think a lot was happening in city government at the time. And I probably said, I know as much about city government as they did. And if you do, and if you think you do, and if you think you have something to add to it, then I would suggest to you, put your hat in the ring and go for it. It's one thing to stand on the sidelines and talk about it, but one of the things that I did before I even ran, though, I got involved in other political races. I remember I was involved with Annette Polly Williams when she ran. Orville Pitch was the first African-American male to serve on the Common Council, and I was involved in his race. Of course, I knew Vale Phillips. Ben Johnson was the first African-American male to serve as president of the council. So I understood politics, not necessarily just being a political science major. I kind of observed it and studied it and thought I had something to add. And I could probably gone. Not because, the other things I did, I ran with the idea, you probably have to have some kind of background of some group that's backing you. I ran with strong support of the National Association of Black Veterans, and I ran with strong union support. I was president of an ASME local, with Scott Walker. He's kind of dissipated or erased the strength of the unions, but I ran with the ASME union. I was president of the City of Milwaukee Appraisers and Assessors, as I said. And so I had strong support of union, SDC, Social Development Commission. I was the area council rep. So I kind of had the neighborhood that I was in. I had their support, and I had a lot of veteran support, and I had a lot of labor support. So when I ran, I thought I would have some degree of success, and I did.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right. And I want to just go back and uplift a few points that you made, right?
Sure.
One, you ran because again, the opportunity aligned, right? You had relationships, right? You had
That's
the relationships with unions, you had relationships with community, you understood city government, and you understood, right? You also your current representative was planning to step down, right? In your
That's
first
correct.
phase.
That's correct.
But then also, right, you spoke a lot related to, like, again, the aldermen that you saw, right, when you were working on the fifth floor, right? They were working on they were on the city council, but they didn't push for creativity, and they weren't pushing models of legislation that pushed the bounds for this city. And that's why you stepped up and you took action and you ran, and you fought for things, including especially housing, right?
That's correct. Darren, the case in point is this. I remember 2600 block on North 18th Street. There were 4 vacant and boarded up houses on that block, 2500 block on North 18th Street. I had a press conference, and I was saying, I can't understand. And the houses, 2 of them were vacant, boarded up, and burned. Okay, they couldn't be rehabbed. I had a press conference one day, and by that afternoon, no joke, by that afternoon, 2 of them were razed. 2 of them were torn down. So the problems that we had back then is that there were a number of vacant and boarded up houses. They had this, I'm going to say white firm, Arrow Contractor, who put orange boards over these vacant and boarded up houses. And they were primarily in the central city. And it was just an eyesore, and it contributed to just a negative stereotype of houses where most people of color live, and specifically African American folks. So I wanted to stop that. And one of the things I did to stop it is that I embarrassed the mayor at the time, who was John Norquist, and I embarrassed city government to say that we can do better. And as evidenced by them raising 2 of the houses by that afternoon, in one afternoon.
No, that is perfect, right? So we're gonna get a little bit, we're gonna go a little bit further, but we're gonna come back to that, right?
Sure.
What you just spoke to was one huge piece of advocacy, right? How as it relates to approaching. No, you're good. Go ahead to the next slide. As it relates to doing advocacy work in this city and really taking action and creating change, sometimes you got to embarrass the people that represent you, because they're not showing up. They'll claim the victories of community, but they won't claim the embarrassments of how they've shown up in their leadership. So sometimes you got to embarrass them to get them to do the work. So let's dive in and talk about city government, right?
Sure.
There are 2 major, decision-making bodies in the city of Milwaukee, right? It's the mayor and the city council, right? The mayor exercises executive powers in the following ways: 1, preparing a $1.76 billion annual budget.
That's right.
Appointing department heads, providing executive direction for the city's operational departments, and then approving or vetoing legislation passed by the council, right?
That's correct. That's
Um,
correct.
and then on the other end of that, right, because we need checks and balances, right? You have the city council, which reviews the mayor's budget recommendations and may make changes to them in the form of amendments. And then the city council also reviews the mayor's appointments, right? So whenever, the mayor's trying to appoint somebody to a board, to a commission,
That's
to
right.
become a department head, that has to go through the city council, and they can confirm or reject it, right? So there's a checks and balances system in this process, and that's important to know as it relates to how to advocate for change in the mayor's office, right? Because if the mayor is not willing to do it, you can leverage the city council to block the mayor from doing malicious things.
And you can be creative yourself, Darren, listeners. You can be creative yourself. In other words, if you have some ideas on how you can make things better, then what you do, you prepare an ordinance, which is the law in city government, or a resolution which is not binding, but it's say we're going to do this a certain way. And so that's where your creativity comes. You don't necessarily always have to react to what the mayor does. I think I would probably argue that people usually know the alderperson. I usually know their alderman, alderwoman, because that's probably the primary source of the primary folks you touch. I used to always think about running for city, county, state, and I kind of settled because I knew more about city government than those other branches of government, and because I thought that was where my personal opinion, where the rubber met the road the most in getting things done. So it's not only just reacting to what the mayor does, as it is creating things of your own. One case in point, at one time, the second highest amount of taxes that we as property owners will pay is for the repair of our street alleys and sidewalks. I introduced legislation, we passed legislation that said in the repair of street alleys and sidewalks, 21%, I think we started at 21%, I think it's 40% now, of those workers' hours that are used to repair those streets, alleys, and sidewalks have to be performed by people who lived in the block grant area. Now, that's not race specific, but it is specific to income. And so you come up with ways in which you can get people who are kind of outside of the loop involved in that process. And there was a lot of opposition to that. Now the whole city of Milwaukee is in the block grant area. So it includes everybody. But at the time I passed it, it was primarily, I'm going to say, minority directed.
Okay, nice. No, thanks for uplifting that. And you can still see how that piece of legislation has impacted, the community today, right?
Yeah, it's called residency preference program. And it's still going on. The problem with it, you have to keep monitoring the program because it galls me, and I'm sure it irritates a number of you other folks too. All of you listening, when you drive down the street and you see things being repaired, and you look around, you're just saying, "Damn, do they have any people of color on this?" And you don't see any. So that legislation really was geared toward having other people work other than those people who live in suburbia.
Indeed. So let's keep it moving, everybody. So before we go any further, I know we've talked about a bunch, right? Sure. Do you guys have any questions? They could be posed if you're on the Zoom. You can put it in the question and answer section. And if you're over live, you can put it in the comments. And those questions will get to me. We'll hold for a few minutes and then we'll keep it moving.
Okay.
And then I'll also say this. If you don't have a question right now, Feel free to ask it at any point in the presentation, and I will make sure that we carve out time for those questions to be answered. And if they can't be answered over the live, I will make sure that they're answered on the event page. All right, we got a question in the chat. What do you think about the mayor's race today? Yeah.
Okay. You're not pulling any punches. I think the mayor's race today, the acting mayor, and I didn't like that title, I don't know, but that was the title they gave it, acting mayor, because you can rest assured you're not acting. Okay, you're not acting. If you are the mayor, you got it, you have it. I think the person who's mayor, Cavalier Johnson, I think he will be and should be elected mayor come Tuesday. And I think he won 12 of the 15 automatic districts in the primary. I see no reason why he shouldn't prevail in the general election. But the problem that the primary issue, everybody, the primary issue is public safety. Primary issue is we all know him, carjacking and speeding and 55 homicides so far to date. And if we keep that up, we're going to have over 200 for the year. And how do we get the police to be, I guess, proactive? What kinds of things do we do to deter crime and it's not only just serve and protect, but do some preventative measures too. And it's not just the police doing it, right? And everybody talks about a holistic approach, and I agree with that. And so, but to answer your question, the mayor's race, I think Cavalier Johnson should be elected mayor this Tuesday.
I'd be.
But we have to vote. That's the other part of it. We have to vote. I won the primary, and it's been 18 years ago, you all. I won the primary against Tom Barrett. Barrett told me like 3 or 4 times, "Oh, I'm not going to run," and I'm going to just put it like it was. Tom Barrett at the time was the great white hope, because the other person who was running was Sheriff Clark. He appealed to the right wing group, and so he wasn't going to quite honestly beat me. And so
Mr. Pratt, if I could interject for a second, and my apologies. And I'd be remiss to say, I want to remind everyone on this call is that, again, the roundtable itself is not not an entity that endorses in any race. We're a nonprofit.
Okay.
And we can't we don't take any stance on this race, and this presentation is also focused heavily on the accountability, right?
Okay.
No matter who's elected in terms of our mayor. But I appreciate you, Mr. Pratt, in speaking to your choice, right?
That is my gut. That's my gut feeling. Who's going to win?
Thanks a billion. So let's switch gears again before we move on to our next section, and that is, what are your thoughts on the zoning changes?
Zoning changes. Well, I think it may be more specifically zoning changes relative to, I guess I'll need a little bit more clarification on it. Zoning changes.
Yeah. So let's do this. Let's continue with the presentation. And
Sure.
Renetta, if you want to rephrase your question, and we can come back to it. And then Cassandra, we may come back to your question. Just thinking about, like, we don't want to talk necessarily about political dynamics, right?
Okay.
So let's talk about the city organizational chart, right? So
Sure.
then this is the huge important piece of the conversation, right? Is one, we're focusing heavily. There's a few different other pieces in the city government, and we might go have a future webinar with some other of these entities, right? You have the city attorney, you have the city comptroller, the municipal judges, as well as the city treasurer. We're definitely going to do something with the city council because this is a big year for the city as it relates to ARPA spending, and as well as, really redistributing some of these dollars in our budget as it relates to public safety, right? Which, most of where the roundtable stands, right? We believe that we need to reimagine public safety in this city.
Right.
And we understand that the distribution of dollars in our current budget is not equitable, right? There's so many needs not being met by our current budget distribution that we need to really explore how we can create change and relate it as it relates to that. And that starts with the electorate. That is you. That's all you viewers. That is me. That's Mr. Pratt here, and so on, right? We decide who represents us in these seats, while we're also working to reimagine how, again, these folks work for us and so on. And we decide right now we're in the middle of a decision where we're deciding who our future mayor is, as well as our future county board, which if you haven't checked it out, go see part 1 of Undoing the Hypocrisy in Our Democracy. But again, our mayor, right? And we're going to go to the next slide and talk about all of the things that are under the control of the mayor. So these, literally everything on this chart that you're seeing right now is under the jurisdiction of the mayor, right? From City Planning Commission to the Redevelopment Authority to Housing Authority, right? To our Fire and Police Commission. And then also our boards of zoning and appeals, right? Which Renee asked a question related to, but all of the ones that I circled in this slide are ones that have a huge impact on your daily lives. A few of these other ones definitely do, but these were the ones that I really want to highlight. One, again, the Fire and Police Commission, they have the ability to hire, fire, and discipline officers when they have done wrong, right? The business investment districts, right? They control how their job is to increase the amount of businesses in core neighborhoods, right? We have one that has been doing a really amazing job, our Martin Luther King Drive bid, right? And getting a series of amazing Black businesses in the mix, but our bids can do more. And then our City Planning Commission can ensure, right, that economic development is happening in our neighborhoods. But all of these things are under the authority of the mayor. The mayor gets to decide who to appoint appoint on these commissions, and who's going to execute the work, right? So that's why paying attention to who is at the helm of that decision making is critical. Let's go to the next slide. So the mayor outlines priorities, again, through appointments in the budget and budgeting, right, that affect the following issues. Our public health, right? So when we're dealing with COVID, when we're dealing with, infant mortality and all of these other issues in our community, right? The mayor has the ability to affect that. Managing and selling foreclosed properties, chartering schools, right? The city of Milwaukee can charter charter schools. A lot of people don't know that. Yes. Public safety, right? Our police department, water quality, as we're thinking about lead abatement and thinking about how do we get rid of lead laterals in the city, the mayor can do a lot related to that, right? Snow removal, as we know, winters are hectic in Wisconsin, and I know they're definitely hectic for me, and I'm in my classic 1996 Volvo, housing, of course, right? The development of housing, property taxes and foreclosures, city infrastructure in the form of ensuring that our roads are safe, right? How can we reimagine our streets? Yeah, go ahead.
I was saying potholes. You know,
Yep.
every time that it snows, there's a basic amount. There's $1 million that the Department of Public Works will use to just get up the snow that fell this morning. That's the basic amount. You set aside so much money in a contingency fund. If you run over it, so far it's been good so far this year because we haven't had a lot of snow. So we have a little fund they call a contingency fund in case you run over the amount that's allocated, and it's $1 million for every snowfall. If you run out of that, you have $5 million that's allocated to set aside to deal with it. So many other issues as you enumerated and named that the mayor impact. In other words, as Common Council president and as a member of the Common Council, you have some appointing authorities for boards and commissions, but make no mistake about it, that the power in city government for the most part rests with the mayor and his or her appointing authorities to different boards and commissions and as department heads in the city.
Yeah, and we're gonna take a deeper dive into that right after we ask this question to our audience. Devin, if you want to take us to the next slide. What are issues affecting the city do you care about and why? Please put it in the chat, and we might speak to a few of them if we have a little time. I think it's important that folks uplift the issues that they care about, and we want to take the opportunity to capture a little bit of that because it will guide some of our advocacy work over the span of this year. Right. And I'll say some of them that I'm seeing in the chat. Someone spoke to the lack of police response. What else we got? Access to fresh food from Marquesa, who is our fearless leader. And I think that
access to
fresh food, right?
Okay.
I know one that particularly, is important to me. Is access to quality jobs in this city, right?
Oh, I think that's really key.
And we spoke to this, Mr. Pratt, the other day, right? Where we were talking about the fact that, young people are leaving, right? Leaving this city. And a piece of that is because they don't have access to careers, right? Affordable housing. Somebody said affordable housing. And some people also said income opportunities.
Affordable housing is one, what's happening nationally, is that we have larger entities that are coming in because you mom and dad and others, you get phone calls every day or postcards every day say we want to buy your house. And they buy it, and after they buy it, rents have skyrocketed. Folks, for the most part, people, I'm not saying everybody, it's broad brush here, but for the most part, they don't care how much, when I say they, I'm talking about the owners of a lot of properties, don't care how much they charge you. There used to be a certain percentage that went for rent. So they may charge you $1,200, $1,500 a month for housing that's really worth about $600, $700. I guess it's worth what people will pay for it. And so it puts a crunch on you for other necessities, other things that you may need. And for the most part, a lot of people don't care who they rent to, as long as they get their money. So, and that a lot of people, lower income folks, they're out of the housing market. They say that about 45% of the housing in Milwaukee County is owner occupied. But in the city of Milwaukee, among, I'm going to say people of color, it's only about 28%. So, and that all of that relates to what kind of income are you getting from these jobs that you may or may not be able to get. That is why it leads to the cycle of, I'm going to argue that maybe 50% of our young people who may go off to college, go someplace else, only 50% of them probably return.
No, thanks
So,
for uplifting that. No.
yeah. So we have to
And
do a better job. We have to do a better job of providing opportunities here in the city of Milwaukee for family sustaining wage jobs. And that fight is always, it goes on, it's continuous. And so, you know, the business sector has to step up. There has to be strong advocacy coming from elected folks relative to partnerships with some of these businesses to make sure that they have a diverse workforce.
Yeah, no, thanks for speaking to that too. You are on a roll. Mayor Pratt, you are sounding like you're running for mayor right now. But I want to uplift a few more issues that folks put into the comments, right? Some people talked about MPS, right? Our public schools educating our young people. Some people talked about, you know, the importance of you know, selling city-owned rentals to tenants instead of investors, right?
Right.
We had a dollar housing program that was trying to be implemented, but you had to like buy 100 houses to be able to get the grants. Like, that's not sustainable. And then people also talked about some other issues related to our house of correction and jailing, right? And I really want to go back and talk about, you know, again, a lot of that's in the jurisdiction of our county, but what is in the jurisdiction of our city is our policing practices, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So as it relates to, you know, what the city could do to reduce folks from ending up in that space is reimagining how we handle criminalization. So, but let's take a deeper dive, because I know we're coming on to our last 20 minutes, and I want to make sure that folks get all of this good information that we're going through. So, like you were saying earlier, Mr. Pratt, right?
Sure.
The real power in city government comes in two forms. One, through appointments, right?
That's
Being
right.
able to appoint 21 department heads and you know, through this, right, these department heads outline annual priorities for the city for their relative departments. They also outline the strategies and measures used to take action on those priorities with or without community. So I would love if you spoke to, you know, what we were talking about the other day, right? Where as it relates to like who's in these department positions matter, right? And how that can shape, that's the difference.
Oh, without a doubt. You know, at one time, the city of Milwaukee, we recruited. We went to HBCUs and recruited engineers. You know, it went to North Carolina A&T, I went to Prairie View, which graduate engineers. And I'm going to say, and I've been out of city government for a while, but I'm still kind of in touch. I kind of suspect we have very few, if any, people of color, very few in those departments of public works. And I'm talking about the Bureau of Engineers, Bureau of Municipal Equipment, street and sewer maintenance, traffic engineering. Those are just some of the departments. Even the other thing, just even with the streetlights that affect all of us. You know, if we have our streetlights going out disproportionately, if they're out a lot, you know, and it's dark or it's dark outside a lot, then I'm going to say in this area in which I live in. I live in the Rufus King area. I know for a fact that this area has some of the oldest underground wiring for street lighting in the city. And they did get federal dollars, COVID dollars, American Rescue Fund dollars to update the lighting here. But that's a major problem because lighting is also related to public safety. So so the advocacy is too, when you see certain things that need to be reported, report them. So there are a number of things I think that that we can do, be open to serving on boards and commissions, no matter what age you are. They have library boards. They have, you mentioned Board of Zoning Appeals, which is a very key board. They have a parking commission. They have fire and police commission. They have a couple of people on there that maybe have should be replaced. I'm editorializing that. That's my opinion on that. So there are a number of you can ask for boards and commissions, and the mayor and or his staff will put yourself out to serve on those boards and commissions, and not just it's not just have your name on the letterhead, but to have some advocacy for things that you think need improvement.
Nice. And we'll go back to that too a little bit deeper in a second. But before I move on and talk a little bit more about the appointment of boards and commissions a little bit more, I want to go back and address a little bit more related to the department heads. One, like again, right? There's the difference between appointing someone in these department head positions that one understands the issues, and then someone who both understands the issues in the community, right? And if you don't have both, right, it'll result in these services not being effective, because we'll create a model that scientifically works, but because it doesn't have the social factors, right, of the condition, understanding the social factors of the people that live in these communities, right, it will result in an intrinsic failure, right? So that was one of the things that we uplifted in our conversation when we were chatting the other day that I wanted to bring back into the fold. But before we go any further, there was a question from the Facebook Live that I'd love for you to get a response to, if you can. Sure. It was can management of business of a business improvement district do anything about businesses that have a negative impact on the community? Specifically, he's thinking about, there's a
taverns.
Yeah.
Is he talking about taverns, or
he's thinking of, they're referring to there's at least half a dozen CBD stores near me in Brady and Farwell in the neighborhood, 3 to 2 minutes walking distance. Some have replaced businesses that provide helpful community resources with these magnets for unhelpful folks from the outside of the neighborhood.
Well, that's the zoning part of it. It was a question earlier, talked about zoning. See, I think what you can do, you can say that, well, what they do, they relate zoning oftentimes, say taverns, etc., can't be near schools or churches. I know near schools, or within so many feet from schools. And I think someone has to come up with ways to regulate CBD places. You have to, in other words, you don't want a proliferation of liquor stores that we have had at one time in certain areas of the city. You have to come up with some type of zoning or some type of statute to regulate those. So it's kind of, maybe that's something that you and we as a collective body say, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to And the counter argument would be that CBD, it's not illegal, right? And THC may be illegal, but CBD is not illegal. But you still maybe want to regulate that as you regulate daycare centers. And we know those aren't illegal, but you may not want daycare centers everywhere, right? You probably for the safety of the kids. And so you have to come up with ways in which you would regulate them. And I don't just sitting here and off the top. I don't know. Some of you who on this call probably know better than I do how you go about regulating.
Yeah. No, I think
But
you've
yeah,
already spoken to it.
I think anything that you got a lot of, that's not positive for the community, then you probably do want to have some kind of regulation of it. I mean, it's kind of like selling, one time people would go in these places and buy cigarettes for a quarter for 50 cents, so you have to put a stop to that,
Indeed.
And we did. They did at the council level and at the state level.
So what I'm going to do, right, because this conversation is getting us with a lot of questions, right? I am going to try and give a few more pieces, like key pieces of this presentation, and then we'll get a few more of these questions asked, right? Before we go any forward, Devin, I'm gonna take a step back. Again, them like getting appointed onto boards and commissions is a huge way to do advocacy work, right? You can reach out to the mayor about being appointed on the boards, and Mr. Pratt, you spoke to that a little bit earlier. That's a way of advocating, right? In this work, but there's also something scandalous, right, as it relates to this, right? Because the mayor has the authority, right, to appoint folks to boards and commissions. Sometimes he does it as, they can do it as political favors, right? They can appoint an alderman, right, who they want to, get some things, want to be lax on a few other things, appointed to a commission for this $10,000, right? So it's a way of really leveraging the hypocrisy again of this system to further your own political agendas. So it's important that folks pay attention, especially after this election gets passed, who gets appointed to boards and commissions. And that'll show up in the decision making. That'll show up in the decision making in our budget process, in our legislative process, and so on. So hold your mayor accountable by paying attention.
Let me suggest one other thing. The Municipal Reference Library, we used to call it Legislative Reference Library. Used to be in the basement of City Hall. You can ask them for a list of all the boards and commissions, and you can ask them for a list of boards and commissions that pay. And they would furnish that to as citizens of the city of Milwaukee. And then you look at it and see who the appointed authority is.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get this other piece out, right? Let's talk about the other piece of power that the mayor has. That's the city budget, right? The mayor gets the first stab at drafting the $1.76 billion budget before it goes to the city council. This year, the mayor also gets the first draft of how we spend, again, this other half of our ARPA spending, our ARPA dollars, right? Our American Rescue Plan Act dollars, right. And that's $197.1 million. That is going to have a substantial impact on this city. And it's important that we pay attention to how we can advocate to have that mayor, whoever becomes mayor, invest in our communities and redistribute some of these. Again, redistribute some of these city dollars, right? We talked about where a lot of the money is going, and it's going to policing, but we haven't reduced crime. It's also and we have a lot of things lacking as it relates to a series of other issues, from health, from our neighborhoods, from again our public works, and so on, that could use more dollars. So as the city's budget process begins, really ramps up in June, where they'll begin, getting opinions of folks. And then there's another advocacy point in October, when folks will be able to testify really as it relates to the things that they care about. And that is another point of advocacy, which we'll talk about closer to the end of this. Let's keep on moving, because I know we're literally in our last 10 minutes, right?
Okay.
So I want to go list off these ways to advocate, which we talked a lot about. We talked about, again, paying attention to when the terms are up for commissioners. And if you have the skills, seek a commission appointment by talking to the mayor's office, attending ARPA and budget hearings between June and September. Our organization is going to be sending out more information to folks about how they can engage, how they can engage in these advocacy points, because that's what we do, right? We take a huge step in advocating as it relates to the city budget and the ARPA process. We released a pension report talking about the city's police department. We're doing so much to inform folks about what's happening in terms of local government, so that we have the tools, so that folks have the tools to advocate for themselves. Also, discuss the needs, discuss what your community needs by addressing, again, the city council and the mayor, right? And then set up a meeting with the mayor's office and bring others who also care about the issues that you care about, right? Because we know that we're stronger in numbers, right? So when art shows up, we show up in masses, right? And then in the last two things is, if you don't like how the mayor's doing their job, run in 2024, right?
That's right.
Everybody should be willing to take a chance to do better and do right by the city, because we deserve a mayor who believes in all of Milwaukee. And then lastly, show up and support local organizations' advocacy. Again, we do this work here at ART. There are other entities that do work advocating related to a series of other issues. Come join the work, right? Come engage in the work and do it collectively, because again, we're stronger in numbers. So lastly, I want to take it to the next slide. Keep on going. We want to give these last little updates, right? We have an election April 5th. That is next week, Tuesday. Early voting ends this Saturday, right?
Yes.
So you can show up, right? You can go early vote anytime at any of the early voting sites. And you can go to the next slide, Devin. You can go to any of the early voting sites, which you can find by looking up on the city of Milwaukee's website. You can also find your polling place if you're going to show up to the polls on Tuesday by going to myvote.wisconsin.gov, and then keep on going. And then again, we always want to end these by making an advocacy ask. And after I make this ask, I'll ask take time to maybe allow you to answer 2 more questions in our last 5 minutes. And that's this. Our ask is for you to advocate, get to know the mayoral candidates by doing the following. Send an email, comment on their social media, or call the mayoral candidates campaigns, asking them the following questions, right? What are your priorities for your first term, right?
Very
Whoever
good.
wins right now, that's going to be a year and a half. 2, What are your plans in the first 100 days, right? Because
Yeah.
that will define your trajectory of what you're going to be able to accomplish for this city in your term. What are their priorities for the second tranche of ARPA funds? And then how are you planning to address the issues that you mentioned when we were talking about what are the issues you care about, right? Early in this slide deck. So that's our advocacy request from to each of you guys that are tuning in. And if you have any questions for me in particular, as it relates to the upcoming election, as it relates to the work that the African American Roundtable is doing as it relates to democracy, please shoot me an email. You can find that in the next slide. And now with these last 3 minutes, I'm going to take time to ask one of these questions that one of my favorite people, Cass Bowers, asked. And it was, what does Mr. Pratt think about Ashanti? Is that AA folks? Oh, what African American folks are looking for in a mayor, right? What do you think we're looking for in a mayor in this time, these times right now, Mr. Pratt?
I think we're looking for someone who's creative, who has ideas, who's strong in his advocacy for things to be fair, for us to provide needed resources where needed most. And I would argue that needed resources are needed most in a number of central city areas, what we call central city areas. In other words, a lot of us, it's not just enough to say that we were born in 53206 or lived in 53206, but what are we doing to improve not just 53206, but other areas of the city where there's some disinvestment, where there's crime. We're looking for leadership and some creativity and some equality based on resource allocation. And oftentimes, and we're looking for that insofar as who's in charge and who gets what, when, and where. And that's what democracy is about. That's what politics is about, deciding who gets what, when, and where, and how. And so I think it's for us for the elected officials to maybe step out of, not just be confined to city government, as to interact with the business sector to say, what can you do better? And what can you do? How does your hiring force reflect the city of Milwaukee? And how do we get more people in the loop? How do we stop the flow of people leaving the city of Milwaukee? In other words, if we want to grow our population, we have to stop the number of people, of our young people who are leaving here, going to Arizona, Atlanta, Texas, where they think there is more opportunity. We want to, some folks may leave because of the weather. Now we can't change that, but we can change ideas based on opportunity.
Thank you for, again, taking the time to spending the time chatting with us and all of the viewers, Mr. Pratt. I want to say this. I know there's a lot of questions that we didn't answer, right? So if you have a question that did not get answered, please put it in the event page. And I'm definitely hoping I can set up another time to chat with you, Mr. Pratt, and we can get some more answers to some of these questions, and we can get those to folks.
And Darren, you can share, I will share, not right now, but I'll share, my phone number with you, and I'm open to it, but I'm not gonna put it out there right now. I'll wait until you and I talk. Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So
and I appreciate the opportunity. to have to talk to you. I do have. I would like to think I am a little woke because I do have a daughter, and I have 5 granddaughters, and they range from 26 to 14. So I try to stay in tune with what's happening out there and what young people are thinking and doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So have a good evening, everybody. I know that we're 2 minutes over, but thanks for tuning in to our second part of Undoing the Hypocrisy in Our Democracy. This series will continue. In our next one, we will be taking a deep dive into, why voting is not the only way, right, to create change in our communities, and some of the other structural inequities and systems of oppression that feed into our democracy. And that'll be completely community based, with a panel full of community leaders. Stay tuned, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.